And ladies and gentlemen, my name is Arcane Static, and today I want to talk about issue 2 of the Little Nightmares comic. So in order for this particular thing to work the way that I want it to, though, indulge me for a minute while I talk about some things that we've already talked about in previous videos. First, let's go back over the denizens of the Maw. Who do we know is on the Maw? Well, in order of appearance, we have the janitor, who has freakishly long arms. We have the two chefs, who are basically copies of each other with minor facial differences. We have the lady, who runs the place. We have the granny, who is weirdly shaped and lives in the water and is gangly and long. From the comics, we also have the ferryman, who has a shape-changing power and the apparent ability to appear in places he wasn't before and disappear just as abruptly. Okay, cool. We also have Six, who is the protagonist of the game and a little kid in a raincoat. And we have the other kids, including the runaway kid, the bread child, and the flashlight girl. Again, from the comics, we have the group of hiding kids around the campfire. So first of all, let's get this thing out of the way. It is confirmed, word of God, that the ferryman and the wax bellman are the same character. Tarsier said so in a tweet. This means that we can stop making theories about whether they are or are not the same character, which is nice. Something concrete in this fandom gives theorists like me and you something to stand on while we posit new theories. So let's get on to the story of the comics so far. In issue 1, the story is that Six stumbles into a little coven of other kids who have escaped the reach of the denizens of the Maw but not escaped the Maw itself. They're somewhere in the walls of the Maw, in the location that has to be central to the kitchen, the janitor's room, and the ladies' quarters somehow. The other kids are surprised to see Six, but sort of warily welcome her into their circle around the fire nonetheless. It's implied that Six has amnesia or is losing her memory or something, and as a means to help her try to remember things, another one of the kids begins to tell a story about how they ended up on the Maw. They finish their story where the antagonist is the North Wind, an intangible being that pursues the child and his sister to try to get them. It is heavily implied that the North Wind is in direct competition with the ferryman for the possession of the children. So the child is left in a place of fear and unease, which is when the ferryman appears and strikes a deal with the child, bringing them to the Maw. Now, let's get into the second issue finally. Six shows up at that same fire circle again, the same kid's still there. She brings the ballerina music box that we saw her looking at in the first issue with her, stolen from the janitor, to show the other kids. They all take some pleasure in it, and we see the reflections of the kids' faces in the lid of the box, smiling, before the strangely hunched child suddenly grabs it and smashes it. One child protests, saying that it had done no harm to him, but suddenly the leeches descend on the broken box. The hunched child, who I will call the Mirror Kid from now on, begins his story. In his story, a group of kids break into an abandoned house where there are said to be monsters. They find a bunch of mirrors covered up in sheets which distort the reflections of each child. The Mirror Kid is afraid to look at the mirrors, but the rest of them do, and end up becoming the distorted versions of themselves, which are objectively better versions. The Mirror Kid is pressured into looking into the mirrors and sees a monster. From what we gathered from the data mine, this monster is the bow-tied, tentacle-headed Hanged Man. When each of the other kids are their reflected versions of themselves, except for the Mirror Kid, the Hanged Man traps one of them inside of the mirror and tears another one in two. The kids devise a plan to try to get everyone back and escape, but it costs the Mirror Kid dearly. Somehow? His physical form shifts into some random shape that we didn't really see anywhere, but whatever. The other kids leave the Mirror Kid in the house, saying that they'd come back to help him, but they don't, and the ferryman finds him and takes him to the Maw. Now, as a story, this is cool. I dig the comic's habit of telling us what are essentially ghost stories. In fact, this comic feels like it would be a perfect fit for an Are You Afraid of the Dark comicization. I like the art style, the writing is solid and consistent, the tension builds nicely and naturally, and there's a definite story in each of them so far. I mean, there's admittedly some ambiguity in what actually happened in the second issue, but hey, I think it's a pretty cool comic. Now, with that said, let's talk about the weird bits of misdirection in it. Back at the beginning of this video, I recapped the denizens of the Maw. People will be quick to start making parallels between the kids' reflections and the monsters, calling the tall kid the janitor, or the double kid the chefs, or the like. That seems deliberately written to coax that kind of parallel drawing, but then what about the muscle kid? That would imply that he's meant to be the ferryman, perhaps, because the granny doesn't fit that archetype, but the huge, imposing stature of the ferryman sort of does. Well, that's the first level. Then there's the antagonist, the Hanged Man. We only know that it's the Hanged Man because of the paintings in the Maw matching up with the character model of the Hanged Man. And this is after having overlaid two of the paintings to each other so that we have a body with a head. There's the possibility that the man in the paintings and the Hanged Man aren't the same, but I'll go ahead and posit that possibility anyway. If he is the Hanged Man, it means that he made his way to the Maw somehow, possibly through the mirrors in the ladies' quarters? But if he's there, then there's a possibility that maybe the North Wind may also be somewhere on the Maw as well. And that's an idea I can no longer ignore. Maybe, if whatever is in direct betting competition with the Wax Bellman, who we know is the ferryman, loses their bet, or fails to get a kid or whatever, they are also transported to the Maw? I'm not sure to what end, but we'll go with it. So the mirror kid's body gets super warped into this weird, stubby, hunched kind of shape, but I couldn't tell you why for the life of me. I'm also not sure what happens to the muscle kid, or why only the double kid and the tall kid got out unscathed. I'm not sure what actually happened with the double kid either. Like, half of him got pulled into the mirror, but the other half didn't, and somehow he was okay afterwards? I don't know. So what I'm saying is, I understand that the comic is supposed to tell about the rest of this world, and that it may not have direct parallels to the Maw or the things happening on it. However, there's a lot of stuff in this issue specifically that feels like it's low-hanging fruit meant to throw people onto a weird track for theories and junk. Made even worse is that there's this issue of which side of the mirror we're on at any given time. We definitely switch sides of the mirror at least once, and you can tell by looking at which arm is torn with the double kid. So the Little Nightmares games give the players these tantalizing pieces of information, but leave out the majority of those ideas, so that we are left to wonder about the possibilities of what each of the tiny idea bits could mean. However, this issue of the comic leaves us scratching our heads in a different way. The comic deliberately obscures and shifts, leaving things not just ambiguous, but purposefully cluttered and difficult to follow. It leaves us in the same place as the mysteries of the game and the DLC, but with a much less satisfying journey to get there. I guess that's why I didn't like the second volume of the comic as much as I thought I would. It's obtuse, purposefully, instead of the mysterious ambiguity that we have learned to expect from the game. That said, it's refreshing to see more of the world outside the Maw. This world seems like it's a pretty harsh place to live for kids, but it also implies that the world is not inhabited primarily by the terrible, fat, monstrous guests as the main species. Perhaps the big cities are where the guests live and work? Or perhaps the kids eventually grow up to become them? I'm kind of inclined against that latter, and think more that there are just two separate humanoid species in this world, in addition to the supernatural beings like the North Wind and the Hangman. Who knows? Who knows what the next antagonist is going to be, or even if there's going to be more antagonists. There's some weird lack of information regarding the third and fourth volumes of the comic, as they seem to have been erased from existence anywhere. They're no longer on the pre-order lists for Comixology, and I can find no mention of them anywhere, not to mention that everyone I have directly asked about it, including both the publishers and Tarsier themselves, have cleverly avoided that question. So I hope that the comic isn't cancelled. But if it is, then we'll have only these two stories to build out our view of the world until more happens. So let's see what happens next. I'm looking forward to the DLC that comes out decently soon, in a couple months. But anything more than that, I'm not sure we're going to get. We'll see. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it. I'm a little stuffed up right now because of allergies, because it's super allergy season right now. So I hope I didn't sound too weird for this recording, but I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, the like and subscribe buttons are waiting just below this video to continue being the things which, having clicked on them, tell me that you have been, in fact, infected by the theory bug. You can also follow my socials. That's the Facebook and Twitter that are down in the description box. I have an official Discord server as well, so if you want to hop on there and talk about theories or suggestions for videos, I hope that gets a little popular recently. There's been some people on there. Thank you guys if you have been there, and if you haven't, maybe go check it out. You can maybe throw some support my direction at the Patreon link that's down there as well. In specific, I'd like to put a big shout out to SNina2000, who is in my top tier reward list. I have no idea what kind of reward I'm going to give you there, so we'll talk. But, like, super thank you for throwing support my direction. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.